Do you find yourself looking for the perfect bottle of wine to go with your fall spread, but you're not sure where to begin? Well, I have got you covered because that's exactly what we are going to talk about today in this video. My name is Tiffany and I am so excited you're here. I help busy millennials who feel overwhelmed in the kitchen learn new skills to create quick, healthy meals with wine pairing. Check out my link in the description below. Follow me on social media for daily tips, tricks, recipes, and inspiration. And while you're there, hit that subscribe button because I'm dropping videos like this every week, and I would hate for you to miss out on the next tip or trick right here inside my tasting room. In this video, we are going to discuss which wines pair best with some common fall appetizers. Then we'll dive into wine pairing with savory main dishes. And lastly, we will jump into which wines are going to pair best with those sweet fall desserts. But that's not all. I also have a super simple strategy to help you create the perfect beverage experience with your next spread and adult gathering. So be sure to stick around until the end. And if you're curious about food and wine pairing right away, click the link in the description below to download your copy of my free basic food and wine pairing guide so you can get started right away. Until then, let's get started with these fall pairings. So first, let's cover how to pair wines with those spicy fall appetizers. Spicy in the sense of baking spices. When it comes to fall, you are usually surrounded by scents and flavors of cinnamon, nutmeg, maybe a hint of vanilla, allspice, all of those wonderful baking spices that we continue to enjoy throughout the winter. With these spices, both flavors and aromas, you want to have a wine that is going to complement those notes of butter and vanilla while accenting just a little bit of that cinnamon and allspice. So your best options to go along with these flavors are going to be your aromatic white wines and your medium-bodied reds, which we will dive into a little bit closer with each idea of recipe. So some of my favorites when it comes to this fall season for appetizers are a delicious sweet and spicy pumpkin dip, my favorite with apples, some butternut squash bites, and baked brie. So when it comes to that pumpkin dip, you of course have all flavors of fall that you can imagine. A little sweet, a little spicy, a little savory. With all of those combined, your best option is going to be a Viognier, which is an aromatic white wine. Now, this wine style typically has some peach, honey, and rose hitting your nose with those flavors of peaches and honey coating your tongue. Being an aromatic white wine, you focus more on the aromatics. So think when you stop to smell the roses to enjoy the day. That's what an aromatic white wine is going to do. It's going to stop you with that smell. Those notes that hit your nose are going to be stronger than what coats your tongue, truly painting a picture for what you're going to taste as the wine rolls over your tongue and in that finish after you fully enjoy that sip of wine. And a Viognier does that and complements so well with that pumpkin dip. Now looking at butternut squash bites, these can be just simply roasted butternut squash to caramelize almost like a toasted marshmallow. So you get those notes of vanilla, caramel, and butter. Another option is to wrap that butternut squash chunk in a piece of bacon and roast it that way, just to add to the caramelization and wonderful bacon flavors. Whichever route you go, a Chardonnay is going to be your best option to bring out the vanilla and the butter flavors in that butternut squash. And when it comes to bacon, you can never go wrong with any wine. So if you find yourself serving bacon on the side, you can never go wrong. Bacon truly pairs with everything. My go-to is going to be a rosé, but when it comes to pairing it with that butternut squash, Chardonnay is the way to go. And lastly, baked brie. This is one of my favorites, not just in the fall, but truly all year round. It's a quick, easy appetizer. You can bake the brie in the oven or in your air fryer. Top it with some fruit spread, roasted nuts, or my go-to is raspberry habanero sauce. So good on crackers, especially during those football games or holiday get-togethers. When it comes to fall, you're typically going to have that baked brie with some roasted pecans or walnuts, or topped with some fruit spread, maybe some apricot or fig preserves. With any of those options, the fruit spread or the nuts, that baked brie is going to go best with a Riesling, which typically has notes of green apple and jasmine, making it the ideal aromatic wine to go along with that baked brie to complement both the fruitiness and the nuttiness of not just the cheese, but also whatever toppings you decide to put on top of it. Now, before we jump into wine pairing with some savory main dishes, I want to hear from you. When it comes to the fall season, are you team apple or team pumpkin? Drop your vote in the comments. I look forward to seeing which team is more represented and how we can add in some additional pairings with those extra fall flavors. So when it comes to savory dishes in the fall, these are typically going to contain pumpkin, squash, yams, or sweet potatoes. Now, all of those veggies on their own are typically going to go best with a light-bodied white, an aromatic white, which we've already discussed, or a rosé. But that's not always the case depending on how you're serving that pumpkin or squash and what seasonings you are putting on top of it. So we touched base a little bit on the baking spice side with our appetizers, but sometimes you might find more of a savory route or umami option with those pumpkin and squash flavors, especially when it comes to main courses. So when you have those more savory options, an aromatic white wine or a medium-bodied red will still work. But depending on the actual umami flavors that you are adding in, think maybe you have a little bit of cumin or turmeric, you could do a full-bodied red wine as well. So we just need to keep an eye out on what seasonings you are using with those veggies. So for example, pumpkin chili is one of our favorites in fall. We do the pumpkin chili, we make some pumpkin cornbread, and of course, pumpkin honey butter to go on top of the cornbread. All things pumpkin, truly a fall dish. With all of those flavors being a little sweet, a little spicy, a Riesling is the best option, which again is going to have those green apple and jasmine notes to complement the sweetness while accenting a little bit of the spice. If you are wanting to focus even more on those baking spice notes, you could also go with a Carignan, which typically has notes of cranberry, raspberry, and cinnamon. So it really accents the baking spice aroma and flavor in that pumpkin chili. Another favorite of ours is going a pasta route with either butternut squash ravioli or pumpkin risotto. Both of these have strong flavors of cheddar, the creaminess of the squash and the cheese coming together, as well as a little bit of the butter. So your best option to go with these is going to be a Viognier, just like we had talked about with our appetizers. So if you're looking for a full, well-rounded meal, grab those butternut squash bites, add in some butternut squash ravioli, pour yourself a glass of Viognier, and you are all set. Now, another go-to for us in the fall is a butternut squash stew. And this focuses more on those umami notes with the cumin and plus or minus the turmeric, depending on which recipe you decide to go after. The one that we do is very strong in the cumin, almost has a Mexican twist to it with those spices, in addition to the cinnamon, of course. So with this butternut squash stew, a Gewürztraminer is a great white option, which is going to be very crisp and aromatic with some orange ginger notes. Another great option for a medium-bodied red is a Cabernet Sauvignon, which typically has notes of black cherry with a hint of spicy tobacco. And it is delicious with the butternut squash stew. Now, before we dive into those sweet, delicious fall desserts, I want to remind you to hit the subscribe button because I'm dropping videos like this every week, and I would hate for you to miss out on the next tip or trick shared right here inside my tasting room. When it comes to fall desserts, everyone thinks pie. This could be pumpkin pie, pecan pie, apple pie, you name it, but all things pie. You think the sweet and spicy filling with that flaky, buttery pie crust, and your first thought might be to go with a Chardonnay. Now, Chardonnay is definitely going to match the butter notes with the crust, but it's going to disappear when it comes to the filling. Your best option to go with these pie flavors will be a Muscat. Super sweet, but not too sweet to overpower the pie, so you still get a little bit of the hint of cinnamon and that bakey, flaky butter crust. Muscat, for those of you not familiar with that style, typically has notes of orange blossom and honeysuckle. So it's a very good aromatic white to go along with these desserts. Another one of my favorites is apple cider donuts, which come together super easy in a donut pan right at home. No need to go to the bakery or your apple orchard if you don't want to. And with these apple cider donuts, the strong notes of apple, the hint of sugar and cinnamon, a Viognier is going to be your best option. So in case you haven't figured out, Viognier is one of those wines of fall that everyone needs to have on hand this season. Now let's keep this momentum going by helping you create the perfect pairing experience at your next adult meal with these 3 simple tips. Number 1, red with red and white with white. As a general rule, red wine is going to pair best with your red meats and red tomato-based sauces, whereas white wine is going to pair best with your white meats and white creamy garlic-based sauces. But that's not always the case, and that leads us to tip number 2, which is to consider your sides and seasonings. As we've learned while looking at these fall appetizers and dishes, it's not always a win-win or a super easy way to figure it out looking at one course. You need to look at the meal as a whole, full, well-rounded picture to truly learn which wine is going to pair best and bring everything together rather than pairing with the individual dish or the individual item. And lastly, sweet likes heat. When you find yourself with spicy dishes, spicy cuisine such as Mexican, Indian, and curry, a sweet wine is going to be your best option. It's going to actually cut back on the spice. So even those of you that don't like spicy food, which was me just a few years ago, the sweet wine makes it bearable and actually tastes kind of good. But if you're looking for a way to accent the spice and make it even spicier, grab yourself a dry wine instead. But remember, I warned you. Now, if you are ready to become the wine pairing guru in your social circle, be sure to download your copy of my free basic food and wine pairing guide in the description below so you can do that and more.